the church bell tolled 3 in the afternoon, a familiar sound that not only marked time in Little Willow Creek, but also seemed to measure the steps of my life, steady and predictable, like each fold of the Bible pages I read every morning on the porch. Growing up as the daughter of Pastor Elias meant my existence was intertwined with that of the First Baptist Church and the very soul of our community, a tightly woven fabric of gentle expectations and watchful eyes. My routine was a comforting certainty. Mornings helping my father with church matters, afternoons spent visiting elderly members or organizing community events, and evenings passed under the soft glow of the living room lamp, reading or practicing, piano, the sounds muted so as not to disturb the quiet of the parsonage. The scent of church candle wax mingled with the constant aroma of damp earth from the backyard was the perfume of my life, a familiar fragrance that promised safety and belonging. I knew every face on Main Street, every piece of gossip whispered. After Sunday service, every tradition honored for generations. There was a simple, unchanging beauty in this predictability, a sense of being exactly where I was meant to be, following the path laid out for me before I was even born. I loved my father, loved my community, loved the faith that bound us, and in my heart, I accepted my role with a quietness I believed was contentment. There were no great surprises, no great dramas, just the calm passage of days under the vigilant gaze of the sky and the community. I was Talita, the pastor's daughter, my future as clear as the water of the creek that gave our town its name, a future that seemed destined to unfold right there, beneath the church steeple, beside someone who shared the same values and simple life. That was my reality, complete in its quietness, unshakable in its certainty, an initial state I couldn't imagine being questioned, let alone changed. The quietness of Willow Creek was profound, broken only by the chirping of cicadas in the long summers and the church bells punctuating the hours. No one arrived in our town without everyone knowing within hours. Gossip traveled faster than the speediest internet. It was on a sweltering Tuesday in August that the buzz began, a murmur of novelty that swept down Main Street like an unexpected breeze. A car that didn't belong to anyone local, with plates from a distant state I'd only seen on maps in the school library, parked in front of the old abandoned house on the edge of the forest, a place that always loomed on the town's periphery like a dusty mystery, and out of it stepped a man who was unmistakably a stranger. He didn't have the casual haste of travelers just passing through, nor the familiar air of someone with roots in the South or Midwest, like most of our neighbors. He moved with a deliberate calm, his eyes surveying the surroundings with a curiosity that wasn't that of a tourist, but of someone observing with an unknown purpose. His clothes were simple, but they seemed from another world compared to the modest, practical attire of Willow Creek. Worn jeans and a faded flannel shirt that looked like they'd seen distant places and countless stories. There was a dust of the road on him, a subtle scent of smoke, and something indefinable that I instantly associated with places beyond the hills surrounding our valley. I watched from the church window where I was arranging flowers for the next service, feeling the gaze of Mrs. Gable from the corner store and hearing the low hum of conversations on the sidewalk. His presence was like a stone tossed into the calm pond of our routine. The ripples spread quickly. Who was he? What was he doing in the old haunted house? The questions hung in the air, laden with a mix of caution and provincial fascination. My father, Pastor Elias, mentioned him at dinner with a measured tone, something about welcoming strangers but with discernment. As he spoke, the image of the stranger returned to my mind, the way he looked at the ancient trees lining the forest, the air of self-sufficiency that enveloped him. I felt a pang of curiosity that went beyond local gossip, a genuine interest in knowing who this man was, arriving without warning, without a known history in our small world. His arrival was the unexpected element, the catalyst that, unbeknownst to me at the time, began to unravel the tight knot of my predictable destiny, introducing an unknown force that promised to forever alter the tranquil landscape of my existence. In Willow Creek, the stranger's presence in the old house remained the main topic in Willow Creek, a constant murmur passing from mouth to mouth, filling the town's silences. Each time I passed the forest road, my eyes were involuntarily drawn to the abandoned house, searching for a sign of life, a wisp of smoke from the chimney, a glimpse of the reclusive figure now inhabiting the place. The curiosity he sparked in me went beyond mere novelty. It was a silent yearning to understand what brought him here, what made him choose our forgotten corner of the world. I imagined his life before Willow Creek, the places he'd seen, the people he'd met, a vast and unknown world that contrasted sharply with the familiar boundaries of my own existence. The routine felt a little more tedious now, the church bell a little more oppressive, the predictability of my life a little more stifling, all under the shadow of that mysterious figure hovering on the periphery of my reality. The opportunity to see him up close came simply, almost prosaically, disguised as an act of good neighborliness, the kind of thing we did naturally in Willow Creek. Mrs. Gable had made an extra apple pie and asked me to take it to the new resident of the old house, a welcoming gesture in the town's way, though laden with a veiled curiosity I shared. My heart raced as I walked down the dusty road towards the forest, clutching the warm pie, feeling the eerie familiarity of a place that always seemed beyond the town's limits. The house looked less haunted up close, just old and worn by time, but still cloaked in an aura of mystery. I knocked on the splintered wooden door, the sound echoing in the afternoon silence. He opened the door, and seeing him there, up close, with the afternoon light outlining his face and eyes that seemed to carry the vastness of the world, was different from watching him from afar. He wasn't frightening, nor exactly imposing, but he possessed a quietness and depth that drew me in instantly. His eyes, a shade that seemed to shift with the light, locked onto mine with an intensity that made me feel wholly seen, a sensation I didn't know I was missing. I explained about Mrs. Gable's pie, my words a bit fumbled by nervousness. He smiled, a genuine and slightly sad smile, and his voice, when he thanked me, was husky and melodic, as if it carried the dust of many roads. The brief interaction lasted only a few minutes, but its impact was immense. I walked back home with my heart racing, the pie delivered, but my mind filled with his image, the sound of his voice, the feeling of being seen. That simple pie delivery was my point of no return. I had crossed the line from observation to interaction, and the stranger was no longer just a mystery on the town's periphery, but a real and disruptive presence in my own world. The balance of my predictable life had been broken, and I knew, on a deep level, that both scared and thrilled me, that my destiny in Willow Creek would never be the same. That wave on the dusty road, that brief conversation about peaches, opened a door I didn't know was locked. My interest in the stranger, Silas, ceased to be mere curiosity and became a deep desire to know him, to understand what brought him to Willow Creek and what he held behind those eyes that seemed to have seen the world. We began to meet, at first by chance, then with a silent intentionality. They were brief encounters, a coffee at the diner when Mrs. Gable wasn't looking, a quick walk on the forest's edge where the trees provided cover, whispered conversations under the sunset behind the old house. With Silas, I could be Talita without the subtitle pastor's daughter. He listened truly, shared thoughts that made me see things from an entirely new perspective, spoke of cities with names that sounded like music, of lives lived differently from the one I knew. He was like an open window to a vast, colorful world that contrasted sharply with the modest, familiar walls of my own. I fell in love with him quickly and intensely for his calm, his intelligence, his way of seeing the world, and for the sense of freedom his presence brought me. This connection didn't go unnoticed in Willow Creek. The murmurs turned into whispers, loud enough to be heard, into disapproving glances, into awkward silences when I entered a room. My childhood friends, once constant companions, began to drift away, influenced by their parents' talk of the indiscretion of the pastor's daughter. The social pressure grew, surrounding me like a tight net of expectations, and then came the inevitable conversation with my father. He called me to his study, the same place where we'd so often discussed Bible passages and church matters. His tone wasn't initially angry, but one of deep concern and disappointment. He spoke of our family's reputation, of my role in the community, of the dangers of associating with a man whose past and intentions we didn't know. He forbade me, clearly and definitively, from continuing to see Silas. The weight of his authority, his love, and his position hit me with full force. My father's prohibition, backed by the community's silent disapproval, dramatically raised the stakes. What had been a curious attraction and a growing friendship now became a forbidden love, an act of defiance. Choosing Silas meant disobeying my father, disappointing my community, and risking my place in the world I'd always known. Our encounters, once discreet, became truly secret, requiring subterfuge and lies that weighed on my conscience. But the need to see him, to be with him, was stronger than the fear. I was at the heart of the conflict, torn between the love I felt and the world that raised me, learning that changing my destiny would come at a high price, a battle unfolding within me and within the boundaries of my small town, leading me toward the looming point of crisis. The life I shared with Silas, woven in secrecy and stolen moments, hung like a precious refuge amid the crushing pressure of my reality in Willow Creek. Every exchanged glance, every furtive touch was a silent act of rebellion against the destiny imposed on me, a fragile bubble of happiness built on the dangerous foundation of omission. I knew the truth was a sword hanging over our heads, ready to fall at any moment, but the forbidden sweetness of our love blinded me to the imminence of disaster. We lived in the moment, ignoring the tomorrow that loomed, in the vain hope that the now could stretch forever. The fear of discovery was a constant shadow, a shiver down my spine at every unexpected sound, every lingering look from a neighbor. This duality between secret ecstasy and paralyzing anxiety became the very essence of my days. The fall of the sword came on a sultry night, in a place that promised refuge but became the stage for my exposure. I was with Silas, the quietness of nature around us offering a brief semblance of peace. Our hands intertwined, the world of the church and community seeming for a moment distant and irrelevant. Then the feeling shifted. There was no clear warning, just a subtle change in the atmosphere, the sudden awareness of an intrusive presence. A muffled sound, voices I recognized, and then the sight that froze the blood in my veins. Familiar? Faces emerging from the dusk, contorted in shock and disbelief, their eyes fixed on us with an icy intensity that swept away all pretense of normalcy. Talita, with him? The question, barely whispered, resounded in my mind like a deafening scream, the undeniable proof that the secret had exploded. In that instant, the world shattered. The security of my home, my family's reputation, the future I was supposed to have, all collided violently with the love I had found and tried to protect. The feeling of being caught, naked and exposed, under the judgmental gaze of those who'd known me since childhood, was paralyzing. The blood drained from my face. My hands trembled in his, and the overwhelming certainty of the consequences hit me with the force of a physical blow. There was no more hiding, no more excuses, no more time. The double life had ended in a brutal instant, leaving behind only the fragments of the broken and the inevitability of facing the storm that would follow. The maximum crisis was there, palpable and devastating, the sharp edge of truth piercing the bubble, thrusting me into the unknown and terrifying territory of open confrontation. The world became a blur of motion and shame after that frozen moment on the path. I was led away from the waterfall, away from Silas, under the stunned gaze of those who found me, the feeling of all of Willow Creek's eyes on me even in the darkness. The short journey back home was made in silence, the weight of my father's disappointment in the presence of the deacon and my cousin more palpable than any words. Each curve in the dusty road brought me back to the life I had so ineptly tried to leave behind, now permanently marked by the stain of scandal. The parsonage, usually a haven of peace and love, now felt like a place of judgment, its familiar walls closing in on me. I was immediately taken to my room, the door shut behind me not with anger, but with a silent finality that spoke volumes about the seriousness of my transgression. Trapped in the sanctuary of my own childhood, the silence of the room was deafening, filled only by the echo of the question, "Talita, with him?" and the persistent image of Silas's face as I was torn from him. Shame cloaked me like a heavy mantle, followed by the cold wave of fear. Fear of my father's reaction when we were alone. Fear of the gossip that must already be spreading through the town like wildfire. Fear of the consequences for Silas, now tied to me in a public scandal in a place that saw him as an outsider. The pain of separation from him was acute, an open wound bleeding the love I had found, and that was now threatened with destruction by the force of my world. I felt utterly alone, isolated by my own choice and the community's reaction. The weight of the disappointment I caused, especially to my father, hung over me, an almost unbearable burden that told me I had broken the trust and reputation that took years to build. I spent hours there, curled up on the bed, the outside world, reduced to my room and the storm within me. I replayed every step that led me to Silas, every shared moment, and despite the present pain, I couldn't regret it. The stranger hadn't just changed my destiny, he changed me. He showed me a part of myself I didn't know existed, a yearning for freedom and a connection beyond the confines of my life in Willow Creek. And even now, at the bottom of the pit of scandal and uncertainty, the feeling for him persisted, an undeniable truce in the chaos. Slowly, amid the despair, a spark of resolve began to glow. I was caught. The truth was exposed. There was no going back or pretending nothing happened. The only way out was forward, to face the storm, and perhaps, just perhaps, to fight for the love that was worth all this chaos. Recovery wasn't healing but hardening. The preparation was silent, gathering the courage for the confrontation to come, accepting that my destiny would no longer be dictated by expectations, but by the choices I had made and those I would still make. The time between the closing of my bedroom door and the call for the conversation with my father felt like a suspended eternity, filled with the solitude of my room and the echo of my own fears and growing resolve. When the door finally opened and my father's voice summoned me, I felt a chilling mix of dread and a strange calm. I walked down the familiar hallway, as if for the first time, each family portrait on the walls seeming to judge me in silence. My father's study, a place always associated with comfort and wisdom, now felt like a courtroom, the atmosphere tense and heavy with disappointment. He was seated at his desk, his face stern, and to my dismay, beside him were Deacon Peters and my cousin Sarah, their faces grim and eyes averted, living proof of my exposure. My father began to speak, his voice low but filled with an authority I rarely heard directed at me. He spoke of the previous night, of the disappointment, of the shame my conduct brought to the family and the church. Deacon Peters added words about the right and wrong path, about temptation and the importance of repentance. Sarah remained silent, her eyes avoiding mine. I listened, feeling the weight of their words, the knowledge that I had broken the most important rules of my world. They argued with conviction about the danger of associating with someone we didn't know, about the importance of staying on the path of faith and decency they had taught me. It was their world, their unshakable truths, colliding head-on with the new truths I had found in Silas's arms. When my father finished, the silence in the room was heavy, awaiting my response, my confession, my repentance. But the words that came out of my mouth weren't the ones they expected. My voice trembled at first, but gained strength as I spoke, driven by the resolve I found in the solitude of my room and the strength of the feeling Silas awakened in me. I spoke of him not as a dangerous outsider, but as the man who made me see the world differently, who made me feel alive in a way I didn't know was possible. I told him I couldn't regret loving Silas, because that love showed me who I truly was, beyond the pastor's daughter. I argued that faith should also include the truth of my heart, that my destiny didn't need to be confined by the walls of Willow Creek. The reaction was immediate and intense. My father stood, the disappointment on his face giving way to contained anger and deep pain. He and the deacon spoke of disobedience, of sin, of the consequences of straying from the path laid out by God and family. The collision was frontal. I defended my love and my right to choose. They defended tradition and authority. The tension peaked when my father, his voice breaking, made it clear I couldn't have both. I would choose my place in the family and church and renounce Silas, or face the loss of everything I knew in Willow Creek. The final confrontation had concluded. The battle for my destiny fought in the heart of the parsonage, and I stood before an impossible choice, the future uncertain and hinging solely on my final decision. The weight of my father's ultimatum hung over me like a dark cloud after the confrontation in the study, each of his words echoing in my mind, forcing me to face the impossible choice he imposed. The moments that followed were of silent agony, torn between the overwhelming pain of disappointing my father and risking everything I knew, and the undeniable truth of my love for Silas and the new person he helped me discover in myself. I replayed every moment with him in my mind, the conversations that opened my world, the sense of freedom his presence inspired, the depth of the feeling we shared. And I compared that to the prospect of renouncing him, of publicly repenting, of returning to the life before, a path that now seemed narrow, suffocating, and false. The decision wasn't easy, laden with fear and sadness, but the resolve born in my isolation and strengthened in the confrontation propelled me forward. I couldn't go back. I couldn't pretend I didn't love him, that I hadn't changed. My destiny, once so certain, had been irrevocably altered by his arrival, and I couldn't ignore that fundamental change. The choice, though painful, became the only possible choice. I wouldn't renounce Silas. I wouldn't regret the love that made me see the world and myself differently. And in making that choice, I was, by implication, accepting the loss of everything else. I communicated my decision to my father in few words, the air between us thick with sadness and a finality that broke my heart. There were no shouts, just a silent, sorrowful acceptance that our paths had diverged irreparably. The goodbye was painful, marked by the pain in his eyes and the weight of unspoken words. I packed a small bag with the essentials, each piece of clothing, each object seeming a reminder of the life I was leaving behind. Walking out of the parsonage, the home that had been mine my entire life, under the blank gaze of the familiar facade, was the hardest step I'd ever taken. I left Willow Creek under the cloak of night, the familiar lights of the town fading. In the rearview mirror, the silence of the car I took broken only by the sound of my own breathing and the racing beats of my heart. I left behind security, predictability, the community that raised and confined me. I left behind the title of pastor's daughter and the expectations it carried. My destiny, once charted within the boundaries of Willow Creek, now stretched before me, uncertain and unknown, but mine. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I knew I needed to find Silas, the stranger who not only made me see the world differently, but gave me the courage to choose a place in it that was mine. The path ahead was daunting, filled with challenges I'd have to face alone, or with him, if fate allowed, without the safety net I'd always known. But as the road unfolded before me, carrying me away from the only world I'd ever known, I felt a bittersweet mix of loss and liberation. The love for a stranger cost me everything I expected to be, but it gave me the chance to be who I truly was. My destiny was changed, not by magic or divine intervention, but by the strength of a feeling and the courage of a choice, proving that even in a small town, a heart can find its own path, no matter how far from the beaten track it lies. The first months outside Willow Creek were a whirlwind of uncertainties and new experiences. Finding Silas wasn't difficult. He was waiting for me, worried and relieved to see me, ready to embrace the uncertain future that bound us. We had to explain everything to each other, the fears, the hopes, the magnitude of my choice, and the weight of the consequences. Starting over in a different city, amid the impersonal vastness of the USA that once seemed just a distant backdrop, was challenging. There was no longer the comfort of community, the safety net of familiar names and faces. I had to learn to navigate a world where my name didn't come with a title or a pre-established reputation, only with the baggage of my story and the determination to build something new. We found a small apartment, both working to sustain our new life, each small achievement, a steady job, a new friend, the feeling of belonging to a place we chose, feeling like a great victory. I still feel a pang of longing sometimes, a silent ache for the smell of wet earth after rain in Willow Creek, for the familiar sound of the church bell, for the faces I knew my whole life, despite their judgment. The separation from my family, especially my father, is a wound I carry, a painful cost of my choice. There's no easy reconciliation for some ruptures, but every day I spend by Silas's side, every conversation we have about the vast world he showed me, and that we're now exploring together, every moment of genuine freedom I experience, I know I made the right decision. He's not just the man I love. He's the catalyst, the stranger, who not only made me see the world, but gave me the courage to leap into it, to claim my own destiny. Today, looking back, I see the Talita who lived in Willow Creek with a distant tenderness. She was loved and secure, but bound to a narrow path. The Talita I am now is different, marked by the scars of rupture, but stronger, freer, more complete. My destiny was, without a doubt, changed. It didn't unfold beneath the church steeple as expected, but opened to the unknown, to a life that's entirely mine to shape. Silas's love didn't give me a castle or a life of luxury, but it gave me myself and the chance to build an authentic happiness, far from expectations and judgment. The pastor's daughter found her stranger, and with him found the path out of the destined course, discovering that the greatest adventure of all is living the life one chooses beside the one loves, no matter how far from home it leads.